Hello and welcome to episode 189 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is June 19th, 2023. And before I get into the usual stuff, I just quickly wanted to mention that the Hexagon loop scarf that I've been knitting, that I've been test knitting or preview knitting for UK Knits has been released. So the pattern is called Hexagon and it's available on Ravelry now, and you can either go through my project page, which is linked to the pattern, or you can look for Hexagon on Ravelry and get the pattern if you are interested. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's talk about what I'm wearing. And as promised, I am wearing my Fragmentation shawl by Stephen West that I knit out of a colorway from the Beauty series by Opal, which is a yarn that is a bit softer than their normal or usual yarn, because there's something worked into the yarn, some vitamin E. I don't know how they do it, but it actually does make the yarn a bit softer. And I chose it because of the stripes in the yarn, so I didn't have to use a new ball of yarn to get a stripe. Yeah, I washed the shawl, and as predicted, I did not block it. I did not put any pins in it. I just laid it flat to dry. I think it still has grown a little bit. Not quite sure whether it's because of the washing or because I've been wearing it a little bit already. Yeah, but I'm still absolutely happy with the size that I knit. I knit fewer rows than the pattern called for because I'm small and I didn't need it longer than this, and I didn't want to use up more yarn. And yeah, and it's more than a semicircle, more than a half circle, so oops, it stays to the front really nicely. It has a wonderful length, covers my whole back. It almost covers my arms completely, so I'm just really happy with how that turned out. And yeah, that's the Fragmentation shawl. It's fairly warm today, so I may take it off later, but for right now it's okay. And this is the t-shirt I'm wearing today. It's knit out of opal sock yarn. That's a mix of wool and cotton, so it's more of a summery yarn, but it's not absolutely summery because it has the wool part in it and also has some nylon in it. The pattern is from the magazine Knit the Cat, which has an English title, but it's a German knitting magazine by the company Shawl. It was Knit the Cat number 10, I think, that I got the pattern from. It's a simple raglan, top-down raglan. It has a bit of a different increase than I usually do. I think I added some short rows. Can't remember whether they're in the pattern or whether I just chose to do them because I prefer to have some short rows in my raglan pullovers. Yeah, otherwise it's simple stockinette, then some 2x2 rib on all the edges. Yeah, really like that t-shirt. And it's probably the first time I'm showing it on one of my English episodes because I've only worn it once before on the podcast, and that was in the early days of my podcast, and back then I was only doing them in German, so it's probably the first time I'm wearing it on an English episode. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. Let me just get my shawl back up on my shoulders. Okay, what's happening? There we go. That's the top edge. Here we go. Okay, then on to finished objects. I have sort of 3 finished objects. I'll explain the sort of in a minute. But my first finished object is, of course, the mystery gnome that we are knitting with Sarah Shearer, the queen of knitted gnomes, and this is her 12th mystery gnome, and I have knit them all. And I think with 2 of the mysteries I decided to knit 2 of them. One happened to be 2 gnomes in the pattern, so I knit 4 gnomes that round. but this time I only knit one of them. Last week I was talking about my color choice maybe not being perfect. But now we've had all the clues and I finished my Nifty and I'm going to show them off now. I don't think it's that much of a mystery anymore. So this is Nifty. So the round mystery object actually is his nose. I kept saying it can't be the nose, it can't be the nose, but it is his nose. And I kept waiting for the beard, but he has so much nose, he doesn't need a beard. The tassel actually did go onto the hat, but not the way we are used to seeing tassels. This is not a flop down tassel, but it's a stand-up tassel. I love it. One of the mystery pieces was 1 foot. I had sort of guessed it might be a foot. I love it. And Nifty has a lot bigger hands and shorter arms than most gnomes, but I really love them. And I love the way that his hands and feet are so close together. It just makes him look so, what's the word? Cuddly is not the word I'm looking for, but sweet and funny, and I just love it. I love how everything came together in this gnome, and I'm really happy that I finished him. And yeah, so this is finished object number 1. Oh, and I must remember to put him into the finished gnomes discussion thread in Sarah Shearer's group, so I can be part of the prize thingy. I've never won anything so far, and it's okay if I don't win, but I'll at least try. Yeah, so that's Nifty, another gnome. And then the other proper finished object is a bit of a funny story again. When I enter my shop, there is this door handle that you use to push the door open. And at some point several years ago, I decided to crochet something around this handle. If there is a video where I show my shop, and I think you can see it there. And I decided to use this opal sock yarn. This is one of their 8-ply sock yarns. So it's like 2 strands of normal sock yarn held together. It's bright and colorful. And I just use simple single crochet and half double crochet stitches. And I'll show you the inside of that old cover. And you can sort of see the colors that I just showed you. You can also see why I decided to replace it. But I'd already thought of replacing it because this is the outside of this door handle cover. And it's almost white. And it's amazing how the color disappeared. So if you look at it like this, you can see the sort of original color. I can hold this up. And this is the way it looks after the sun beat on it for years. So because it was losing color so much, I decided to make a new one, but I never got round to doing it. And then a few weeks ago, these holes started to appear just because people kept grabbing it and touching it, and the yarn just gave up. So I decided to make a new one. I took it off the handle and had it lying around. And then last week, I finally decided to make a new one. And because I don't like to repeat things so much, I decided I want a different pattern for the second one. And because I'm into granny squares so much at the moment, I decided to use granny squares to knit the new door handle cover. And I measured it and I realized if I do 3 granny squares, that would be the perfect size to sew it round the handle. But then I have to keep an opening for where the handle is attached to the door, and then I need something for the top and bottom. And I crocheted 3 granny squares. I crocheted them together, and then I just kept crocheting in rows on top and on the bottom of these granny squares, and I've sewn the top and bottom together, and then there needs to be this opening where the handle is attached to the door. And then once I've put it onto the handle, I can go and sew the back of the granny squares together. And then it'll be on my door. And it will look nice again. It'll look different. I'll have granny squares welcoming people into my shop. and I'm really happy about that. And if I don't forget, I'll try and remember to show you a picture of what this looks like on my door next week. So that's another finished object, which was a very quick project. And the next sort of finished object is another part of the Grimblewoods collection by Sarah Shearer. And I've put the two that I've already finished from the collection on display today. And I did not knit another of the gnomes, but I knit the toadstool, the mushroom that goes with the pattern. So this is the Grimblewoods toadstool. And I knit it out of the same yarn that I used for those two gnomes. And yeah, I'm really, really happy with it. It was a fairly quick knit. Now there are two more gnomes to be knit. And there's also a little house or a little cottage that goes with the collection. But right now I'm thinking maybe I'll sort of finish the project without knitting the cottage. I'm not quite sure yet. We'll see about that. But that's why this is not a proper finished object and it's not a proper new cast on. And that's one of the things that I did. I want to finish more projects and not cast on so many new ones. So if I start a project within a project, it means I don't have to start a new project on Ravelry, but finishing a piece of it doesn't finish a whole project. Might be a bit complicated, but I hope you understand what I'm talking about. So that's a toadstool, and that's all the finished objects I have for today. Then on to works in progress, and I'll start as usual with my socks. And I have continued on my lace pattern sock that I'm knitting as part of the pattern battle over in the Opal Abo group, in the Opal subscription group. And I finished the leg of the sock. And I brought the first one, the finished one, and now I can show you how the stripes are completely opposite. Well, come in a completely different place. So it's a nice, it's not just a bit different, but it's a whole lot different. That's what I'm trying to say. So I finished the leg. I now have to knit the heel and then the rest of the sock. You know how that works. The next sock that I have on my needle are the 3 times a cable sock, one of the Sock Madness patterns from this year's Sock Madness. I'm not knitting in the competition anymore because the competition has been over for quite some while now. Last week I showed you the finished heel, I think. The only thing that was left to do were the decreases, the gusset decreases, which are placed on the sole of the sock with this sock. And I finished these. So it's just this 1-1 pattern in between the decreases. And then I finished the decreases and I just started knitting the pattern in the round. And the pattern that I'm knitting for the sole of the sock, that's really interesting, is a 2-color pattern that mimics the cable that I knit on the leg. So that's really interesting. So for this part of the sock, I actually cabled the light stitches on top of the dark background. But once I finished the heel, this is now a 2-color pattern, a stranded 2-color sock pattern. But it sort of looks exactly the way the cable looked. Yeah, so this pattern is gone now, and I'm knitting the 2-color pattern that looks like this one, and I'm also knitting the 2-color pattern that I've started at the top of the sock, and I'm also continuing the pattern that was on the front of the leg that continues onto the front of the top of the foot. Yeah, so I'm knitting these socks for myself. So there's not a lot to do. Don't know how many rounds I do have to knit, but there's not that much left to do until I start the toe. So I hope to finish the first one fairly quickly now, and then I'll have to do the second sock. The third sock I have on the needle uses this special colorway that looks like a black dragon colorway, but it's just a special colorway, and I'm mixing it with the sort of white and black dragon, which is also a special colorway. It's not part of a normal series by Opal. And I have continued knitting the foot, and I stopped knitting because I didn't have my sock blocker with me and I didn't know how much further to go. And as I'm not knitting the socks for myself, I couldn't try them on. And I've decided now that I am going to do another 10 rounds of just plain knitting, and then I will do the black and white toe, and then the first sock will be done and I can start the second. I really love the color, and yeah, one of the reasons I'm able to give them away is because I know the recipient is going to love them, and I also know that I will have enough yarn left to at least knit shorty socks for myself out of the same yarn, probably with the same color heel and toe, and maybe ribbing, so that I can have some of the yarn for myself. I might do wrist warmers instead of shorty socks. Not quite sure yet. We'll see about that. So that's all the socks I have on the needle right now. Then onto other small projects. Oops, I put that away quite a bit. The next project I'm going to show you is the double knit brioche hat that I'm knitting out of the double knit brioche book by Nathan Taylor, the Sockmatician. And I'm knitting the hat, Thank You Beata, and it uses this, I think it's called honeycomb brioche, in 2 colors, and I absolutely love the pattern. So on one side you mainly see the light color, and on the other side you mainly see the dark color, but it's the same pattern, and I think it's so beautiful, and it's squishy and lovely. And I have knit the hat high enough now that I can flip the brim over and you can still see some of the pattern. So with the brim folded up like this, you have sort of the light color yarn as the main color, both for the brim and the main body of the hat. But now with the decreases, it's going back to have the dark color as the main color. So later, whoever wears the hat can decide whether he wants to wear it or she wants to wear it like this or fold the brim up. And I've decided to start the decreases now, which also means I'm not going to keep the hat for myself because it is just a bit too tight. I will find either a person with a smaller head or I give it to a child. We'll see. I'll just start the decreases now. That will cost a lot of concentration after this bit was really easy to knit and I didn't have to pay attention to it. But I'm not quite sure whether the decreases in the crown of this hat are going to be the same decreases that I did for the cuff muff double ender, but I'll see. I'd love to learn new decreases, or maybe if he says you can use any decrease, maybe I'll just go and pick a different one so that I can learn a new one, but we'll see. That should be exciting. Double knit brioche hat by Nathan Taylor. Knit out of the light color is Opal 100 Wasser color, and the blue is the beautiful Alpaka sock yarn by Hansa Farm. And now I'll show you a sort of new cast on. This is another of my projects where I have one project on Ravelry, but I'm doing lots of small pieces, and that's the dishcloth project. And I think I don't know when I started it, but I have knit other dishcloths out of this hobby yarn before. I did a special video for hobby yarns that they sent me for free, and I did a video to where I showed off the yarn and showed off what I had done so far. And I got a whole pack of cotton yarn in rainbow colors, and my goal was to knit many dishcloths with that. And I haven't done that in a long time, so I thought it's time to go back to my dishcloths and then maybe finish that project at some point. But this time I'm doing a single color dishcloth and using a pattern out of the Japanese knitting stitch Bible, because I realized one of the reasons I stopped knitting dishcloths is that most patterns for dishcloths are fairly simple and I just get bored with those. And then after I got some yarn for either Christmas or my birthday, I started knitting more complex patterns and I realized that's what I really like doing. So I chose another pattern from the Japanese knitting stitch Bible and I cast on, and this is what I've knit so far. So I think it's a really nice pattern that I wanted to try out, and I thought if I just do one pattern repeat, it's too small for a dishcloth because I don't like them to be tiny. But now that I've done 2 whole pattern repeats, it's quite big. So I'm not quite sure whether this is actually going to be a dishcloth or whether it's going to be like a small hand towel, like for the bathroom for guests. So what I'm planning to do right now is to just finish up the yarn and then see how far I get and then decide whether it's going to be a fairly big dishcloth or a rather small hand towel. I don't know yet, but I'm happy to be using the yarn and I'm happy to be trying out a new pattern out of that book. And this is what I've got so far. And then I have a proper new cast on that I am knitting out of this yarn that I've had in my stash for I don't know how long. This is a Lana Grossa yarn. It's called Louisa and it has all my favorite colors in it. So all the turquoisey blue colors, and I originally got it to make something for myself, but now I'm knitting something for somebody else, and that's because I'm knitting another dress. I've knit this pattern probably 6 times before, and it's the what's the pattern called? You have to look on my Ravelry page if you want to find out, because right now I can't remember what it's called. And I knit the pattern in small sizes for the 3 daughters of my 2 cousins when they were small, and then I knit them again in bigger sizes when they'd grown bigger, and one of the dresses got lost in the mail and I never re-knit it for that girl, and that girl now approached me with the little dress that I knit for her when she was still in kindergarten, asking me if I could change the dress in a way so that she could still wear it. And I said, I'm sorry, that's impossible. The girl's 10 years old now. And she never got the bigger version of the, I think it's bilberry dress. But anyway, so I showed her the pattern and she said she'd love to have another one of those. And I started knitting it, and this is what I have so far. Now the thing is, the pattern goes from 2 years to 8 years. And I've knit the 2-year and I think 4-year version when they were small, and I knit the 6 years and 8 years size when I knitted the second time. And now that she's 10, I'm trying to sort of change and adapt it to a 10-year-old. So this is the top of the yoke of the dress, and then once I finish the pattern, 1 pattern on each side is going to be the sleeve, and 2 patterns on the front and 2 patterns on the back are going to be the front and back. And yeah, it'll be a very simple top-down dress from there on. And then with the other times I knit the bigger sizes, I added some sort of pattern to the bottom of the dress, and I'm also planning to do that for this one. And I'm not quite sure which patterns I was using back then, so I will probably just go and look for a different pattern just to keep myself interested in the project. Yeah, so that's what I'm knitting for Hannah. So this is called Hannah's dress, and if you want to know which pattern it is, it's linked on the project page. So these are the new cast-ons. Then on to some old projects that you already know, and the other garment. So the dress is a garment, and the other garment I have on the needles at the moment is my black cashmere pullover that I'm knitting out of Hansa Farm's cashmere yarn, and I was knitting the front and back in the old dye lot that I still had, and I finished the ball of yarn that I was knitting, and I decided it's long enough to start the ribbing. So the same as on the top of the pullover where I use the new dye lot to do the ribbing. I've now started the ribbing on the bottom of the pullover, and yeah, I've not started the ribbing on the sleeves yet, but I want to do that as well, and then I can finish the pullover, hopefully not too far into the future. Yeah, doesn't look very different, but I'm very happy to be knitting the ribbing. And then there's one more project before I come to our crochet along, and now it's getting a bit warm. And I have continued crocheting on my granny square lace, alpaca lace project, and I was talking about 1 or 2 rounds of black double crochets, and I started the first of the black rounds, but then before I finished the round I was just so curious about which beads I was going to use for this square that I interrupted my normal granny pattern, and I started putting in beads just to see what they would look like in the project. So I had black beads that a friend of mine gave me, and I started with those, and I really liked the beads when I first saw them. But when I put them in here, I realized they are just so small and tiny and black. They are almost invisible. So I wasn't too happy with that. And also they are so small, it was really difficult to get the yarn through the beads. So I decided to use some sort of clear beads. And then I used a different sort of, oh, these are the clear beads with the silver inside, so the yarn doesn't show through. I really quite like these, but none of these seemed perfect. So I bought some more beads. I looked at home for some more beads, and I just tried out a whole lot of different beads. And I think it's one thing to have your beads and hold them up next to your knitting or crochet, but it's always difficult to tell what they will actually look like until you put them onto the yarn. So next I put silver beads. I really like those as well. Then I put some more clear beads. So these are completely clear, there's no silver in them. Then I put, I think these are the same beads that I used as the second kind of beads, and it was just a box that I had at home and I didn't realize it was actually the same. And then I tried some more almost clear beads, but they have a sort of a tiny bit of color in them. Then I tried black beads again, but in a bigger size. I do like these as well, but they too are almost invisible. Then I tried another sort of clear beads. So these are clear as well, with no silver in them, but they are just a tiny little bit less clear than the other sort. So this is clear beads from one company, and these are the clear beads from another company. And you can see they look sort of, they are just a tiny bit milky, if that makes sense. And these are really clear. And then I tried these dark grey beads, and I do like those as well. But I've fallen in love with the idea of having these clear beads where you can sort of see through, you can see the yarn through, and if they sort of fall on top of another color, because I'm holding the yarn, I'm doubling the square to be a triangle, you can sort of see the other color through. So I've decided this is what I'm going to do. And also with these beads, they are fairly consistent in size and form, whereas these ones tend to vary quite a bit within one box. I think maybe you can see that this one is smaller than this one, even though they came out of the same box. And with these, they tend to be a lot closer in size and form. Yeah, so this is what I did last week. I put lots and lots of beads onto the edge of my shawl, of my granny square, and some people have suggested I should keep them in and just keep switching beads, or I should choose 2 or 3 sorts and switch those. but I didn't want to do that. I think the whole shawl is so sort of nice and elegant, even though has a lot of colors. I just preferred the look of having one sort of bead on the whole edge. Plus, I tried this in the middle of the round, so I do have to finish this round and maybe add another normal round before I actually start putting in beads. So I will have to undo the whole thing. But I just wanted to show you how much it helps to actually put beads onto a project to help decide which ones you prefer. Yeah, I kept holding it up like this as well because I'm going to wear it as doubled up most of the time, I think, unless I use it as a blanket somewhere. Yeah, so that's the granny square, the huge lace granny square that I am crocheting, and that at some point will get finished. Surprise, surprise. Okay, then we come to the last project, the cardigan that we are crocheting in the crochet along, the Horizon cardigan or Hexagon cardigan. And as you can see, I've attached my two pieces. So I finished the second piece, whichever was the second one. And then I tried it on and a friend helped me hold the pieces together, and I decided I wanted the neckline to be a bit more open. So I added 2 rows of crochet to this side. So this must have been this. No, this was the first one, because with the second one I cut off the yarn. I was talking to somebody and without thinking I cut the yarn off and I wove in the end, and then I realized that was not a clever thing to do, but that's how things work out. But anyway, this side had the yarn hanging on the back, so I added 2 more rows of double crochets or the granny square pattern onto this piece, and then I did a third. Am I telling the truth? Yeah, I did 2 rows on this piece just for the back. Then I did 1 more row on this piece and then went up, putting a row onto the other piece and crocheted them together while I did that, which means that this side got 1 row and this side got 3 rows, so that the seam is a bit offset. It's not right in the middle, but I think if you look at it and once I'm wearing it, it will not be very obvious. And if somebody notices, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It doesn't have to be straight in the middle, right in the middle. So this is what I have right now. So what I need to do now is I need to at least add 2 rows onto the fronts so that they meet. And then I want to add a little more so they overlap for the buttons to, so I can sew on the buttons. But I also want it to grow lengthwise. And I probably want at least 1 round around the neck. So what I've been thinking is I will put 2 rows of crochet onto the front, round here, and then up that front, and then back again. So I have 2 more rows onto the fronts and on the bottom edges. Then I will crochet down and I will add a whole lot of length to the cardigan. And when I have decided I have enough length, then I will go around the whole cardigan to add 2 more rows to the front so that they overlap. I will add 2 rounds to the neckline and 2 more rounds to the bottom, and then that should be it. And then I don't know if I'll do it at the end, but at some point I will also add rounds to the sleeves so they get longer. And then I should have a nice, warm and pretty long cardigan is what I'm thinking at the moment. Yeah, I won't do any buttonholes. I will just push the buttons through the pattern because the granny square pattern gives you lots of holes anyway. So I'll look for buttons that have the right size to be pushed through here and still stay close when I close the cardigan. Oh, it's getting heavy. So that's my plan. That's where I'm at with my crochet cardigan. I hope some of you are crocheting one as well and enjoying it as much as I am enjoying mine. And that was everything I knit and crochet last week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!